Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us today for Shifting Ransomware Tactics and How to Protect Your Organization webinar. If you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to type it into the chat section. We'll be answering questions at the end. Today's key takeaways from this webinar include the current state of Locky malware, hearing about the recent high-profile cases, how cyber criminals are changing their attacks, any new ransomware families, as well as our experts sharing their recommendations to protecting your messaging infrastructure. Today's presenters include Mike Bloom, Director of Sales, as well as Greg Leah, Principal Threat Researcher. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to Mike.
Just to introduce myself, my name is Michael Bloom, Sales Director for North America, and I've been with CloudMark for about 7 years in two primary roles, technical and sales. For the first 3.5 years at CloudMark, I spent my time deploying solutions for our customers. The second half of my time, I've been working with new and existing customers to find abuse protection solutions that best fit their environments. I also wanted to take a moment and introduce CloudMark, who we are and what we do. CloudMark is a trusted leader in intelligent threat protection against known and future attacks with a 14-year track record in providing messaging security solutions. We're typically the vendor of choice for spam protection among leading ISPs around the world, to the tune of over 130 Tier 1 service providers and thousands of enterprises via our partners, safeguarding approximately 12% of the world's inboxes. Our software provides the fastest response times in the industry with the highest accuracy rate, averaging around 99.6%. Of all of this equates to handling about 1 out of every emails against wide-scale and targeted email threats. We continually track 15 million unique sending IPs every day, which are sending about 5 billion messages. This slide represents what the Beasley Group, an insurance company who provides cybersecurity insurance to enterprises, published a report earlier this year regarding ransomware attacks covered by them had more than quadrupled from 2015 to 2016. And in 2017, they're expecting an astounding 400 cases against ransomware. One thing to note, nearly half of these attacks occurred in the healthcare sector. Here's a few examples of some of the attacks that happened in January of 2017. Kansas City Heart Hospital fell victim to a ransomware attack where its patient data was encrypted. Even though they reported that their patient's data was not endangered or operations were affected, the impact was of a financial nature. The hospital paid a ransom, but then the hackers unlocked only a portion of their data, demanding a second ransom for the rest of it. The DC Police Department identified 123 of their 187 video recorders for the closed-circuit TV system covering public spaces within DC were affected with ransomware. Even though DC didn't pay the ransom, it took them from January 12th to January 15th, about 4 days, to take the infected devices offline, remove the malicious software, and restart the system at each location. It was a pretty poor event to happen only 4 days before the inauguration on January 20th. Guests staying at the sold-out 4-star romantic sea hotel Jägerwert in Austria during the opening weekend of winter season also fell victim to ransomware late last month. The particular attack had disabled the functionality of the card readers for their guest room doors, preventing any guests to enter their rooms once they've left. This resulted in a loss to the hotel of about $1,800 in Bitcoin to restore the system. The hotel stated that this was the last of 3 attacks that they've experienced lately. These attacks are ones that occurred just in January of this year. The more devastating figure that's shown on this slide is that of these attacks, 51% of the victims end up paying their attacker to remove the ransomware. So based on this broad visibility into the email messaging stream, our security team is exposed to a vast amount of malicious content, which we continually analyze looking for the latest trends and threats. One of these experts on our team is Greg, who I'll let speak towards the the trends we're seeing regarding the Locky malware outbreaks.
Thanks, Mike, for the introduction. So my name's Greg Leah. I'm the principal threat researcher at CloudMark, where I'm focused on improving accuracy towards malware attacks delivered by email. So talk a little bit about what we've been seeing with the Locky family of ransomware lately. So Locky is the notorious family of ransomware, which originally surfaced in the first quarter of 2016 in February. Typical of ransomware, it encrypts the user's files and demands a ransom to be paid by Bitcoin. Locky gained notoriety throughout 2016 due to its aggressive high-volume spam campaigns, which were driven by the Neckers botnet. So a typical Locky attack arrives as a JavaScript or another type of script file archived inside a zip archive attached to a spam message. Locky uses an affiliate model for distribution, which I'll talk a bit more about later. And as I mentioned, traditionally the main distributors of Locky have been the Neckers spam botnet. So this is a screenshot of a typical Locky email delivered by Neckers. So you can see the paycheck or the attachment is a zip file, paychecks underscore random numbers and letters dot zip, and we have a fairly typical social engineering body of the email encouraging the victim to open the attachment. So inside that zip file would be our JavaScript downloader, and that would be used to install the actual Locky ransomware payload. So recently, Neckers stopped distributing Locky right before Christmas. So after the spam runs delivered on December 21st, Neckers botnet completely stopped distribution of Locky. So throughout 2016, there were a couple of multi-week breaks in distribution of Locky by Neckers, but this has been by far the longest. So there were two other notable outages of Neckers distributing Locky in 2016. The first was May 27th to June 21st, and the second was October 8th to October 24th of 2016. So here's a graph illustrating the first Neckers Locky outage. So on the left, you can see a cliff in the graph when they ceased distribution after May 27th. And then on the right side of the graph, you can see a spike in the graph when they resumed operations on the 21st of June. This second graph illustrates the October outage of Neckers distributing Locky. So on the left, you can see the standard cyclical weekly distribution of Locky, and on the right side of that graph, there's a valley where the Neckers botnet ceased operations during that time. So as I mentioned, after the spam runs on December 21st of 2016, Neckers completely stopped distributing Locky, and they have been inactive since that date. Now this has caused a significant dip in the graph of global malware spam volumes, which I'll show on the next slide here. So this is based on CloudMark Global Threat Network data, and as you can see on the left, right after the spam runs on December 21st, the global malware spam volumes as measured by CloudMark plummeted, and they've continued to operate at a low level since that date. This next slide shows a graph from the composite blocking list, which also illustrates the same drop in activity in late December. So the composite blocking list is an IP-based block list that's compiled from large-scale SMTP servers and spam honeypots. Composite blocking list provides a list of IPs that are known to be sending spam and are used to block possible spamming bots. This data that they've compiled gives them the ability to create a pretty good model of what the global spam volumes are looking like at any given time. So this graph basically illustrates the same things, the same shape that we've been showing. So why did they go offline? No one actually knows why they've actually taken a break from distributing Locky, but there are some interesting incidents that coincide with the DITS inactivity. The date of May 27th coincided with the arrest of 50 Russian hackers by Russian law enforcement who were purportedly involved in online fraud related to the Lurk botnet. So it was interesting that the same date that these arrests were made in Russia, the first outage of Neckar's distributing Locky happened the same day. Recently, last month in 2017, 9 additional suspects were arrested by Russian law enforcement, also in relation to the Lurk botnet. And this could be a possible reason for the extended outage of the recent Locky Neckar's distribution, as there are suspected ties between these arrests and periods of Locky or Neckar's inactivity. So Locky is distributed using an affiliate model known as ransomware as a service. So even during the Neckar's Locky outages, we did observe other affiliates continuing to distribute the Locky family of ransomware. So a little bit more about ransomware as a service. In this model, the authors provide the software and backend infrastructure to affiliates, and the individual affiliates are responsible for distributing the malware in a method of their choosing. And the authors of the malware who are operating the infrastructure take a portion of the proceeds, which are generated by the affiliate. The way that affiliate is identified is each Locky binary has an embedded configuration, and in that configuration there are several fields, including an affiliate ID, which signifies to the operators which affiliate had distributed that particular binary. So historically, Neckar's has been by far the highest volume distributor of Locky, but there are other affiliates operating different distribution methods, and some of those include the Neutrino exploit kit, the Nuclear exploit kit, and also lower volume spam campaigns which were associated with the Covter click fraud Trojan. On this slide, I have an example of Locky distributed in these lower volume spam campaigns associated with Covter. So the emails are actually very similar. The subject and body contain your typical social engineering lures, and again we have an attachment which is a zip file. Interestingly though, in this case, if we decompress the first layer of the zip, here we have a zip within a zip, and then if we decompress that layer, we see our WSF file, which is the script which is used to download the final Locky payload. So in this case, this affiliate is actually distributing 2 types of malware with these spam campaigns. The WSF file on the previous slide downloads 2 executables. The first one, A1.exe, is a Locky Osiris variant, and A2.exe is the Covter click fraud Trojan. So with that, I'll hand it back and we can talk a little bit about CloudMark's solution to the ransomware problem.
Thanks for that, Greg. So as I mentioned previously, CloudMark protects over 130 Tier 1 ISPs around the world. This slide here is just to kind of give a general representation of all the customers that CloudMark represents. So the goal of CloudMark, as Greg mentioned, was to continue to improve our visibility into the messaging stream to identify the latest malicious trends. As a result of this continued effort, our customers benefit from new tactics we deploy within their environments. For the Locky examples we've provided previously, we primarily focus on attachments within the messages, such as PDFs, RTFs, Excel and Word documents, JavaScript, and Windows screensaver files. Those efforts presented themselves in our latest 3054 version of the software, where we made gross improvements in how we handle our message pre-processing. Our next version, slated for later this year, will focus more on malware within PDFs and Word documents, dealing with the obfuscation methods that spammers use, as well as malicious macro and embedded code detection. CloudMark recommends to all of our customers to employ additional tactics to identify malicious content within their networks, which may not appear through their messaging stream, many of which Greg and his team employ internally to identify malicious content. Some of the mechanisms we use includes correlating content fed back into the CloudMark network feedback system from end users, honeypots, and email administrators, and leveraging third-generation malware detonation solutions. This allows us to not only identify suspicious attachments and messages, but also enables us to measure the efficacy of our solution in the wild. All of these tactics allow CloudMark to remain the primary vendor of intelligent threat protection for service providers on a global stage. And now I'll pass this over to Evelyn.
Thanks everyone for joining. We'll go ahead and answer some questions that we received during the presentation. Mike, this one's directed to you. What's the best way to protect your individual user, from ransomware attacks?
Yeah, so the best way to protect the individual user from ransomware attacks is primarily through training, and then there's a couple of general best practices. First ones, and the first one, probably the most important, which is back up all your important files on a regular basis. Save those to a disk that's not on your existing computer or laptop, and that way you always have reference back, or the ability to reload them in the event that you ever do get compromised. Don't open attachments from unknown senders. That's a huge thing that a lot of people don't quite understand. Disable macros in Microsoft Office. When Greg had showed you the attachments, etc., within messages, or even JavaScript that could be embedded within the HTML of a message, that allows macros to actually run and compromise your machine without you even knowing about it. Regularly install software updates. Microsoft, Mac iOS, all the OS vendors out there provide a lot of security updates on a frequent basis, so you should always stay up to date on your security updates. And make sure you have a good antivirus solution on your PC. Those are probably the primary things that one should do to protect their end users.
Okay, great. And then, Greg, do you predict seeing any other families of ransomware emerging to fill the void left by the Neckers distributing Locky?
Sure, yeah. So as I mentioned in the presentation, there have been some of the lower volume affiliates that have continued to distribute Locky during the Neckers outage. There have also been a couple of other families of ransomware which have emerged during the outage of Neckers and Locky, one of which is the Sage 2.0 ransomware, and also the Cerber ransomware has increased its operations during the outage of Neckers distributing Locky. We expect the numbers of these new families of ransomware to increase, as well as new families of ransomware to emerge going forward.
Okay, thanks, Greg. That's all the questions that we have at this time. And so thanks everyone for joining. A recording of this will be available to you sometime next week on our website as well as an email. Thank you.